Coming up to almost a year ago now, man, time sure has flown, Bethesda released an update that came with a bunch of Creation Club stuff, mostly the makeshift weapon pack and the Enclave stuff, and today I feel it is time to tackle another one of the joke weapons introduced. This one is actually from Fallout New Vegas' Lonesome Road DLC, so taking it across the country to the Commonwealth, today we will attempt to beat Fallout 4 with the nail gun. So some details about this weapon. It is a nail gun, so naturally its ammunition is the nail. However, it seems New England was made with a completely different building code in mind. Well, this is Fallout we're talking about, the code is very loose in definition anyways, but nails are incredibly hard to find, only being sold by the handful by only one vendor. There are many other quirks with this weapon, but we'll get to them during the run. As for rules, I can only use the nail gun and the other usuals. I will say, I have used joke weapons and other horrible weapons before, and I kinda prefer them over this weapon. Time to hammer home the journey of this godforsaken weapon, so let's get started. I reloaded at the end of the vault to save 30 minutes of mediocrity. Welcome to Construction Dan, a distant relative to the builder Bob, and once again, I am something that I am not for sure a Nannybot could love. Or I'm the sole reason there is always 0 days since the last accident, who knows. As for my special stats, nothing too special this time around, just wanting to make sure I get gun nut and my usual otherwise. When I exited the vault, I did my usual scavenging, demolishing wrecked buildings just so some contractors could build townhomes in their place and charge 100 times the original price. Give it a week, and the joke will be severely outdated. I then proceeded to do my usual opening play, mostly going postal until I leveled up and take the Idiot Savant perks so I can roleplay as myself, then afterwards wandered into Concord. I just sat around watching a raider do the forbidden under Molotov throw, and when I went to go scavenge for loot, I failed a perception check, and I was deep in a horde of raiders, so I had to dip. I mean, well, what should I be expecting? Well, before I raid the raiding party, I should probably go get my weapon first. I then talked to the trash can to sell some loot so I can afford the nail gun, then I took the uneventful walk to Cambridge, being careful to defuse the mines along the way. I used to be a construction foreman before the nukes fell, so I just sat around as my underlings did all the work while I reaped all the profits, ignoring the potential violations in the process. I looted the zombies of their loot, then talked to the toaster oven to clear the easy quest, then getting an experience bonus on the side. I was more into the easy loot here for selling to begin with. Afterwards, I wandered around what I assume is Silent Hill because all the fog until I got to the most broken early game vendor Suggs. He sold me a pretty well upgraded nail gun with a lot of the mods already installed and for cheap too. I have a bad feeling about this. I was also able to purchase a small amount of nails and a frankly substantial upgrade on my armor. I will say with my glasses I look quite dashing. So, as this lovely raider will demonstrate the cons of the nail gun. Yeah, the nail gun goes through ammo like a sim desperate for attention from streamer, and the biggest downside, you cannot craft nails, for some stupid reason. You can put nails through a baseball bat, but God forbid making those nails yourself. I guess New England uses screws rather than nails. And Suggs is probably the only vendor in the game who can actually sell the nails, and only at 15 to 18 at a time. I complained about it during the piggy bank run, but I feel the issues are compounded here given how fast you go through the ammo. I wanted to do a run without resorting to item duplication for once, but with a nail gun, this is now a must. So I brought along my dog to fetch nail boxes. Well, at least they aren't rusty. I kept doing this until I had about 10,000 nails. Normally this would be absolutely overkill, but in reality, I will probably go through them really quickly. After this, I returned to the town whose game named after it only lasted 2 weeks, so I don't think the nail gun actually works. Every time I fire the gun, a puff of steam comes out of it, and half the time my nails don't even make it to the target. There might be some clipping issues with one of the mods on the weapon. Instead of every nail hitting the target, it's probably closer to about a third of them, so I just have to blindly fire. Quite literally. At least in town I do get a hard hat, so I'm ready for on-the-job safety. Yeah, right. Inside the museum I did have some mild range issues, so I have to get close and nail the raiders. At least it only takes 1 to 2 nails to take down, at least for the time being. I talked to the gravy train and grabbed my perception bobblehead so I'm aware of any construction related slapstick coming my way. Probably not. I then went outside to fight the raiders, and the inconsistency is starting to take hold. I then proceeded to nail down the Deathclaw, and I totally didn't become close to death. I then talked to Preston and got a pretty lucky level up. So I don't plan on siding with the Minutemen this playthrough, though building houses does sound pretty fun. I have sided with them twice in a row, so for variety's sake, I thought the Brotherhood makes sense. Plus you get to build a giant death robot, so yeah, that works out. I hammer home justice on the raiders nearby, and got some loot for my troubles. And yeah, this bloody steam is getting very annoying. I tried firing in third person, but I suck at aiming. Maybe if I spec into a VATS build, things might be a little bit different, but I'm not one for VATS besides mine chucking anyways. Inside ArcJet, I get a pretty relevant quote from Dance, and then went to town on the robots. I sure love it when my job gets automated and I get laid off. At least these sins don't take a lot of nails to go down. Arcshed isn't that long of a dungeon. I just decommissioned the turrets, broke yet another safety violation by turning on the oven, then scavenging their parts for ammos to sell, then forcefully nailed down the sins until I got my deep range transmitter. A quick and easy mission. We were back outside where I exploited the fact this mission gives a lot of experience, and multiply that experience, and granting 2 full level ups in the process. Man, I love free levels. Well, since I am in the area, I thought I could go hit up some locations. On my way to Fort Hagen, I give a settler his one and only water break for the shift, then drove these iron stakes into the zombies' hearts, then marked Fort Hagen on the map for later. Next up is heading towards Diamond City, and on my way there I decided to have some fun with the raiders on the boat here. And at the low level the raiders are, the fight goes down pretty well, but the one in power armor did take quite a few more nails to put down. On the way out of the boat, one of the raiders' feet were really pounding the boards. Outside of Diamond City, the security guards were having a shootout with the mutants here, so I joined in on the fun. My range issues aside, or my weapon's horrible spread, it sure makes long-range fights a drag, so I just have to sprint my way into the building and fire at the mutants from short range. They do take a few more nails to put down compared to the usual raiders, but at least I could grab some easy loot, and when I tried to get into Diamond City, I tried to bash Piper, but when I put my gun away to apologize, she took it as a threat and fired at me. I guess the inside scoop on cut corners on the recent housing projects really got to her. Well, I put Diamond City on pause for now and wandered my way towards Good Neighbor, and screwed over the rat roaches in a building nearby. I wandered into a random building and took on a psycho here. Either I did nothing, or his health will be deleted in a second, which is basically the main story of most enemies with a decent amount of health. This weapon is very inconsistent. I then decided to have a go at Swan, either as a test of confidence or stupidity. Probably the latter. At least with my good armor at this point in the game, and all the chems in my purse, I could just point and click at Swan and the damage slowly melted away at his health pool. I would complain on my weapon spat spread, but at least one has a massive hitbox, so at least I could hit something. The battle wasn't that bad, and I could come out on top. I also bopped the Freedom Bot here. At this point I returned to Sanctuary to do some trading and found a Brahmin inside a room. You do you, game. I also talked to Surgis and completed his pretty easy quest, since I already had everything done. I know Mama Murphy is always high, but I don't think this is the right form of high. Turns out Trash Can Carla wasn't here at Sanctuary all this time, and instead she just wanted to hang out at the diner. Well, I put some nails in Wolfgang's coffin, then I could go to town on trading. Mostly getting rid of my carry weight during the process, and picking up some stim packs. I wanted to check out a couple more vendors to see if they had any nails in stock, so I wandered towards Good Neighbor, putting some ghouls in the firing line. Finn might be a tool, so I showed him what a real tool looks like. Yeah, while I was here, turns out neither vendor here had any nails, so that plan was demolished. Well, since I'm in the good neighborhood, I thought I could pay the railroad a visit. On my way there, I wanted to get some loot from a legendary ghoul, but the raiders here really hit the peak of my shit list, so they have to go down. They really put up a good fight, mostly because they're grenades. My range issues are only compounded, and plus my steam issues too, so that made the fight all the more difficult for me. I came close to death way too often during this fight, but once the numbers were thinned down I could press onwards. Inside the church, thankfully the ghouls aren't reality unstable this run. I could type in the password and enter the base. The railroad always complains they are nailed down, so I do just that. It took them a second to acknowledge my presence, but once they realized I am serious, they began to open fire. Because of my range issues, I had to lead everyone into my CQC box, and eventually Desdemona walked right into my trap and was shot down, and really at this point only Glory was a threat. But by playing around the pillar I could take her down, and then take her really good armor for myself, then took the culling to the HQ proper. Yeah, suffice to say, I really screwed them over. They couldn't bolt out of there, and I spiked their lives from their bodies. Once the railroad's belongings were stripped, I left the building and decided to head into the library. I remembered about the side entrance, so I tried to enter, and I typed in my luggage combination, and I guess I'm the mayor of the city. This easily could have been a luck check in New Vegas. Inside the library, it seems the robots are pretty nice to me today, so I joined them in defending against the super mutants. But in all reality, I am just here for the intelligence bobblehead, anything to make me think I'm smart, though some of my decisions say otherwise. The defense of the library was kind of fun, just watching all the mutants walk right into my firing line and getting sprayed down. Once I was happy with the carnage, I watched the scavenger scavenge for nails, and then I entered Park Street Station. I will say, despite these mobsters wearing nothing but the basic trousers, they sure do take quite a bit more ammo to take down. Either that or my nails just breeze right past them. Can't really follow the nails to begin with given the smoke and all. The first section really wasn't too bad, it's when things open up is where I start to struggle. It is pretty hard to nail these wannabe gangsters from afar with basically a melee range, so I had to play around cover and using the terrain to close the gap until they were all iced. The crew might be evil, but at least they are still miles more moral than the average scalper. Thankfully things were a lot nicer inside the vault properly, less room to get shot at after all, so I could run up like the idiot I am and start my remotely stabby. I did avoid the second big room because low range issues, so I brought everyone into the second section and iced them all at once. Dino really needs to stop gloating to Nick and turn around and meet the psychopath coming right at him. I then talked to the synth named after the loneliest night of the year, then began the big escape. When they say ghouls have shingles, that does not mean I need to nail them all down and sit on the roof. For the most part, I blitzed through the escape portion of the vault since there really isn't much danger down here. Before too long, we're at Skinny, and unlike most runs where I'm pretty overpowered, I have to be smart with this run. So for my big brain play, I don't really know what I was doing. I led Darla by herself and picked her off, and then I went around the room cleaning up the ads. I really didn't have a plan this run, just went with the flow. Probably why everything I built falls apart. Back on the surface, I talk to Nick, and I get a lot of experience from my troubles, then begin the hike to Diamond City. Hopefully Piper isn't still upset with the whole opening the door stint. Before then, I returned to Sanctuary and got some upgrades for my nail gun since I had gun nut upgraded. Once I was happy with the upgrades, I returned to Diamond City to continue along the main story, and I tried out my upgrades on some wild mongrels in the area, and yeah, it's still mostly the same. Either I do nothing, or their health crumbles like wet tissue. Before entering Diamond City properly, I plucked some keys from the mayor to cut down on backtracking. Then I did apply for an interview for the new construction gig, but since I don't have any structures mentioned in my application still standing after 200 years, I don't get the job, but instead I get to crawl around a killer serial's house. I questioned my sanity, or what's little left there is, then began Fort Hagen. On the rooftop outside, I walked away at the turrets, nailing down their circuit boards, and then entering the fort properly. Seems today the Synths just got done with the tournament of Smash Melee because they were all wave dashing around. I took some perks and refractors so I could laugh at their fire. Despite my ranged incapabilities, at least I could pluck away at the turrets. Somehow. Inside the basement, I definitely had an intense wave dash encounter, but at least the Synths are really bad at the frame reads. They were even dashing around the room after their deaths. It was quite some riveting gameplay. I wish I could actually see what I'm shooting at. I don't know if it's my girlless, don't demonetize me YouTube mod, or the weapons just being garbage, but regardless, it does take away from the experience. It's all the more apparent with Kellogg. Normally I could hunt down the invisible prize in the box no problem, but I can't really see anything past my puffs, and I basically had to track him around the room with my compass. It prolonged the fight longer than it needed to be. Oh well, at least I got my relevant story bits from the brain bits, and then I attempted to pop a balloon from afar. Back in Diamond City, I tried to cool the situation by hammering in the jagged nail head, but most struck him out in my stead. And at one point I thought a resident was going to pull an Oblivion theft in broad daylight. I then talked to Nick and Piper to start the Memory Den segment. I didn't care about the architect's intent on design, I just sprinted past everything. I wanted to hit some nails in my boredom. After the life story was dumped on me, the only bits I recalled were Virgil and Glowing Sea. The latter part doesn't sound edgy enough for me. I began waddling my way south of Fort Hagen, killing the sting wings in the process. Hitting these flying nails in the head, I'm at least grateful the zombies like to line up in the firing line, so I don't need to apply much brain power into the carnage. Inside the small town just outside the Glowing Sea, some super mutants were playing with the Deathclaw, so I closed the door on them so they can enjoy their quality playtime together. As for the Glowing Sea itself, I don't like rat scorpions because for some reason all my nails tend to fly past their bodies. Well, this is the nail gun we're talking about. As for the most part, I played the Glowing Sea safe, avoiding as much combat as I could. These enemies do take close to a full clip to take down. Seems there is a mole in the construction crew, or a lot of them, so I had to clean out the trash. And at one point, I walked right into the middle of a Deathclaw hive.
You're a tough one, kid. But there's only one way this can end.
Oh,
Thankfully, I could escape this batch of iguanas, and I continued my way towards Virgil's cave, marking Sentinel site for later. Well, my Deathclaw avoidance plans ended up being scrapped as I got into a tussle with one. But given this is a Bethesda game, their AI intelligence is roughly equivalent to the outside air temperature in Celsius on a good day. Rocks really do break these games. Well, the lizard got some airtime after his death, just so it looks like he died from fall damage and not something humiliating like a nail gun. As for the second one outside Virgil's cave, I thought the Deathclaw was going to say screw this and run away, but it came back and did a surprise lunge attack that did a number on me, mostly my blood pressure. But by weaving around, I could walk away with a few more experience points under my belt. I then talked to the orc, and next up is Green Tech, but I also wanted to do Fort Strong. Either way, I have a date with a missile launcher to face. Yay. Well, at this point, I decided to snub off the courser and instead join the Brotherhood on the oversized balloon, so I proceeded to start filing my business taxes during the flight. I do think the memory den is less of a slog. I then ignored the boring lecture and climbed the nearby ladder to skip the entire nonsense, and it seems nobody, not even the game, cares about that. I then met the members of the board, and I don't really care who's in charge, just let me get back to the construction site. At least I get a good set of power armor and an upgrade on my existing attire, so now I'm feeling confident enough in tackling stupid ideas. My first dumb idea is Fort Strong, which is probably the only hard part of siding with the Brotherhood. I tried to walk across the water, but because all the chips I eat out of boredom, I sank like a rock. When I entered Fort Strong, Strong isn't there, just a bunch of his friends greeting me with rocks and bullets. The first target I fired on was the legendary Butcher, who took several coils before I had more pressing matters, like the local inspector who has criticized me and not wearing a hard hat. I went around the town clearing out the small fry, and at one point I had the demo man coming right after me. I do have some range issues, and spread, but when you're the size of a house, it is pretty hard to miss my mark, and down they go. And for the most part, cleaning up the remaining stragglers wasn't much to write home about, and inside the fort, the close nature of the interior made repairs simple enough. Had another butcher to contend with, but at least I don't have a giant breathing down my neck, considering me the next test subject for a space program. Eventually, the upstairs was cleaned out, and I'm down in the basement. I wanted to rush a mutant who does not fear OSHA, though I think he blew himself up in the process. I just rushed him down and used my nails to pin him down. At least the mission is complete, the Brotherhood has their children's toy to play with, and I figured now I can turn my attention from green mutants to green tech. Because of how crutched power armor is, I don't have to fear the gunners, and compared to the mutants, this place was a breeze to blast through. Gunners try to apply fashion over function, and Final doesn't do much to block nails. Just to hammer home how good power armor actually is, I walked into the wrong hallway that gave the rocket launcher a massive advantage, and it seems they took their aimbot training lessons from me and completely missed the obvious target. Well, they went from DIY to die all the same. The rest of the climb wasn't too much to write home about. I just pointed in a general direction until the experience thing popped up, and since the gunners carry valuable ammo and stim packs, I will leave this place with a net positive. For the courser at the end, sure, I do suck at invisible targets given my steam and everything, but the room is thankfully very small and cramped, so I just have to point in a general direction until he fell down. Collateral notwithstanding. Yep, totally collateral damage. Well, before I go to code the chip, I decided to play with the ghouls in the radiation pit. I took the expressway down, then wandered into the pit. I was ready for all the ghouls to come out and pile onto me, but it seems they all really had a thing with a mongrel and a rat scorpion, and were more concerned about that than this Tin Man. Well, their brains were so rotten they got stuck on a fence, and I just blasted them apart. I then returned to the derailed road to learn what's in the courser chip, and got my blueprints from Virgil. Back aboard the compensation airship, I relayed the information to Maxim, so now I get to build a teleporter. Maxim might not be very bright, but at least he knows to trust construction to someone with construction in the name. Except I was missing some parts, so I had to do a bit of shopping, but oh well. I molted my shell, then finished the construction and entered the institute. One of the most important rules about power tools is not to show off in front of family members, as I accidentally, screwed up the mission and offed father. But because the game does not recognize the nail gun as a viable weapon, the synths were not hostile. Well, I wanted to be hostile, so I shot the guards here. It took several bullets before they even acknowledged my intent. Well, I fought my way out, and I returned to Maxim. Seems he's pretty angry that I can't follow instructions. Have you seen my resume on construction gigs? Well, because Fallout 4 doesn't care about failures, I can continue on the quest line. I then talk to Ingram, and she lets me in on the biggest construction project in history, rebuilding a giant robot. Well, Dan now has a new purpose in life. I then return to Diamond City, and seems Scar is out of town, so I have to hike my way to General Atomics, which is very far away from everything I've traveled to so far. On my way there, I did a drive-by at the drive-in, then I played around in a landfill looking for my wedding ring I threw away. Well, I had a bunch of rats come out at me. I played Exterminator and thinned out the mole population, never found my ring, just a bunch of copies of Suicide Squad. I continued to wander around just doing whatever interests me. I wanted to play around in the cemetery, however it seems it's the opposite season of Halloween, so there are no zombies to play with. Before long I'm at the Galleria, and I'm let inside the park. I go to the bowling alley and I wanted to play a game, and I don't fancy paying $5,000 a game. I know inflation is really bad these days, but this is ridiculous. I forced my way to a free game, and I tried to go for a strike, but these bowling balls ain't worth anything, so I used my pin nails to strike down these pins. I then talked to Skara and got her to join the Brotherhood, and then I started to mess around with the Galleria because I've never really messed around with this place before. I began to blast the guards around the place, then messed around with the quirky robots. I stole from the clothing store, jumped to the front of a line, got some flame-roasted coffee, became Punch-Out Champion, watched a live demonstration of the General Amazon grade products, and charbroiled myself. Once the park was cleaned out, I returned to the airport to get the next part of the construction done. Well, Liberty Prime needs some joints, and thankfully I already shopped for a magnet so I don't need to go to the hospital for the 43rd on-the-job injury this week. Next up is grabbing some nukes from the glowing sea, and heading towards my target destination. I was ambushed by an albino ragstag doe. Honestly, forget that the albino variants of wildlife exist in this game, but then again I never get above 25 for runs, or level 50 in general. After all, Santa did finish a run at level 49, and that was an everything run. Briefly go through the glowing sea to get to my destination, also I can get my GPS tracker. Government probably is watching me at the moment. Inside the nuclear pyramid, I begin to blast my way through, with other ghouls throwing themselves onto me. At least I don't have to aim, just fire. Besides the walls having eyes, there really wasn't much going on in this dungeon dive, and before too long I'm at the Wrath of Adam. The big robot was trying to charge a death beam, so I just closed the door on it. The fight thankfully didn't last too long, and then I was able to put my tracking chip onto the nukes to show that I'm not under house arrest. Also on my way out I was ambushed by a legendary glowing one. I honestly never remember if there was a boss ghoul ambushing you here or not. Back outside I had the hardest fight of the run. Not a behemoth or a deathclaw, just a bunch of blood bugs. There was a red widow in the midst, and it was legendary, so they were really deadly and were hitting very hard, and my health was getting drained rapidly. But by keeping hitting the stim pack button, at least I could survive for a bit longer, but the game decides to crash on me. Next go around to show dominance, I did everything the exact same. I just ran around in circles, plugging away at the swarm of mosquitoes, until eventually they were all squashed. Florida is truly a dangerous place. Back at the airport, Ingram is almost done with the construction of Liberty Prime, so I put on the finishing touches. I do have the power tools after all. I fired on the power, and system diagnostics say the processor chip is bogged down by unwanted apps that snuck in during the last store update and needs a hardware upgrade, but first I did a reload on nails. Back aboard the Pridwin, it seems a local AI bot went rogue, and we need to put it down before it generates any more abominations for hands. There wasn't much to note heading towards listening post Bravo. It got its name because I tried to listen to dance, I posed some nails into a skull, and I went Bravo. I returned to the Pridwin and I got promoted to Paladin. Next up is taking out the railroad. I forgot this mission existed. I forgot about it when running, and I also forgot about it when scripting. The battle wasn't much to discuss. The railroad were showing off their 9-inch railway spikes, while all I had were my small 2-inch nails. I planted the charge, and mission complete. No wonder why I forget this mission exists. Back aboard the balloon headquarters, I relay the information, and now I'm in the final bits of the run. I then take a vertebird to my ass fusion. Once the bird was done circling its prey, and landed and started to pluck away at the scents. They're all requiring a bit more ammo to go down, so good thing I restocked beforehand. With all the perks I've taken in Refractor, I'm just laughing at the robot's pew-pews. I grab my password from the desk, and instead of dealing with my crap aimed down an elevator, I made my own elevator at terminal velocity to the surface, then entered the basement. Thankfully grabbing the agitator wasn't too difficult. Having some power armor made the trip non-stressful. The most stressful part of the escape was the Lord of Thick sentry bot. Thankfully I could nail it down, and it wasn't that difficult. Same true for the Assaultrons, though I did have to duck around corners to not get beamed. Besides turning a robot into a washer, there wasn't much to note, and before too long I'm out of the building and back in my transformer. I plugged in the battery, pressed the big button, and we can roll out. Except for doing babysitting, I told Liberty I'll be traveling to the grocery store, but when I got there, it turns out it was following me all this time. Carnage then unfolded in the courtyard, and at this point, I don't need to do anything. The game is done. The reinforcements here are just overkill, and the synths never really stood a chance. Liberty spread his freedom beams, and to embrace football, I took a football right to the face, and then we started the final dungeon. I got my pulse charge, and it was a frankly easy charge with the reactor. I did try to participate in taking out the synths, but the robots here were all leveled up, and they had significantly more health than their other variants, so it'd take a quill or two to take down. At one point I let a sentry bot out to play, but it does not believe in playing fair, so I had to blow it up. At least I'm ending the run with 9 fusion cores. Frankly, overkill. I then took the fight to the biolab and demolished the forces. Inside the courtyard, the battle was very one-sided. It does help one of the knights here was legendary, so I don't really need to do anything. I took the elevator to the director's office, and seems father was in defense position. I opened my relevant doors and continued the big ol' fight. Since I still have a lot of nails in my possession, I decided a more violent approach couldn't hurt. I mean, they'll all be blown to bits at the end of the paragraph. We led the charge into the reactor room, and they threw everything they had at us. Sure, they have rocket launchers, but I have a lack of common sense. I just charged past the forces, planted the bombs used for imploding buildings, told the kid to watch the demonstration up close and personal, press the big button every construction worker hates to press, or loves, depends on your mileage, and successfully beating Fallout 4 with the nail gun. Well, that was most certainly a run. While the nail gun was alright, the weapon itself has so many drawbacks that it makes using it a pain in the ass. Also, I had a level 2 idiot savant prompt after completing the main story, so yeah, 4 level ups off of that, and 8,400 experience. As for my thoughts on the run, I'm not a fan of the nail gun. For 1, the steam emitting from the weapon made firing it annoying. For 2, the weapon spread and accuracy made enemies either take no damage or just drop like a fly, but the biggest reason is the ammo. If it weren't for the item duplication, I would have never used this weapon. I would be restocking on ammo after every enemy, and it probably would have been a pacifist playthrough. I will say overall with this run, besides the one crash I had, I somehow beat the game without dying once. And with how close I have to get to the enemies, I'm frankly astonished. Well, time to put this weapon back into its toolbox and go back to being rational. I say that, but I do have a run coming up soon involving a weapon I've been dying to try out. Well, hopefully y'all enjoyed this run. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochism, and any other ways I could torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you on the next one.